Hey, what's up everyone? Welcome back to Babylon Talmud. Today we're studying Daf Kuf Zayin, Daf 107 of Masechta Pesachim. Some interesting sugyas on today's Daf. Hamar, medina. Right? That's like basically if you don't have wine, are there other substitutes you can use for like Havdalah? You can use beer. Minimum Shiur. Right, if when you have a kosher beracha, how much of it do you have to actually drink? It's also an interesting question, right? What else? Not eating on Erev Pesach, going way back to the beginning of the parak, to the Mishnah, when it says that Arv Pesachim, right, liyochal, right, Arv Pesachim samuch lemincha. So it's talking about mincha ketana, mincha gedola. We're going to discuss that a shtickle. And eating things on Erev Pesach. What can and can't you eat on Erev Pesach? We already saw this way back when in Masechta Brachas on Daf Lamed Hey, that Rava would drink some wine on Erev Pesach. We're really going to get to that the first thing tomorrow. And we're going to start the sugya already at the end of the Daf today. So we are going to start on Daf Kuf Zayin Amud Aleph, about 8 lines into the page or so. Amrele Mar Yenuka Bar Kshish Umar Kshisha Brei Rav Chizda le Rav Ashi. So Mar Yenuka and Mar Kshisha Brei Rav Chizda, they said to Rav Ashi, Zimnachada ikla. So it says here Ameimar, but the Gilyon changes it to Ravin, which I kind of like, because Ravin was one of those people who would travel from Eretz Yisrael to Bavel. So it says Mar Yenuka Mar Kshisha Brei Rav Ashi to Rav Chizda to Rav Ashi, Zimnachada ikla Ravin la'asrin. One time Ravin came to visit us here in Bavel. V'lahavalon chamra. And we didn't have wine. Aisina le shichra v'lo avdil uvas tvas. So we didn't have any wine, and we had to make Havdalah. So we brought to Ravin some beer. V'lo avdil. He wouldn't make Havdalah on beer. Uvas tvas, and he went to sleep, distraught. He didn't have any food to eat. He couldn't eat anything. Couldn't make Havdalah. And then the next day, we searched far and wide, and we finally found him a little bit of wine, and he was able to make Havdalah the next day, and then he ate epis. And another year, Ravin came back to our town. And again, we didn't have any wine. Look, they don't really drink wine in that wherever they were. I seen a shichra, so again we brought him beer instead. Omar, and Ravin said this time, Ihachi, if this is the case, I'm noticing a pattern that you guys just simply don't have wine and instead you have beer. Hamar medina hu avdil v'toim midi. So he says, well, if that's the case, Ravin said, if that's the case, you guys simply don't have wine around here, and instead what you have is beer. That makes beer Hamar Medina. Hamar Medina literally means the wine of the state, meaning that this beer is essentially the equivalent of of the role that wine plays in other places, and therefore, since this is Hamar Medina, so this would suffice. And he made Havdalah on the beer, and he ate. Shmamina Tlos, we learn out 3 things from the story. Shmamina Amavda B'Tfilah Tzorch Shavdil Alakos. Okay, we learned that somebody who says Havdalah in Shmon Esrei Ma'ariv, like Mistam Ravin did, he nonetheless still made a Havdalah on Alakos, right? And we're saying that, meaning because if all you had to do was make Havdalah in davening, well then what's the big deal that you didn't have wine? I mean, you already said Havdalah in davening anyways. So the point is that even though you said Havdalah in davening, you still have to make Havdalah alakos. We also see that you're not allowed to eat until you first make Havdalah. As we see that Ravin, because there was no wine, he didn't eat until he found wine. We also see that anybody who didn't make Havdalah on Motzoi Shabbos, so you can make Havdalah the next day and until Wednesday, as we see that Ravin just made Havdalah the next day. And of course, there's also the fact that you're allowed to use Hamar Medina for Havdalah. Rashbam explains why maybe we didn't include that. Maybe we were talking about things specifically about Havdalah, not necessarily about what to use for Havdalah, whatever it is. But we also do see from there that you're allowed to use Hamar medina for Havdalah, which is very interesting. Now, in this context, in the context of this Gemara at least, it seems like Hamar medina is generally when you don't have wine. Meaning, if you don't have wine, then you can use a replacement. I mean, Hamar medina is often defined basically as anything that is a popular drink where you are. So that could be beer, it could be tea, I think is Hamar medina. I've heard things like maybe orange juice could be considered Hamar medina if it's like popular where you live. Milk, things like that. Maybe even soda, arguably. I mean, I don't drink soda, so maybe not. But anyways, right. But meaning, the point is that in my mind, Hamar medina is always just like an equivalent. Like, sure, you can use wine or you can use any Hamar medina, at least when it comes to Havdalah. So it says here Rav Huna me Rav Chizda, but that wouldn't make that much sense because Rav Chizda was a student of Rav Huna. So the Agos Sabach switches it around and says Ba'amine Rav Chizda me Rav Huna. So Rav Chizda taka asked a kasha from Rav Huna. Ma'u l'kedusha ashechra. Can you make kiddush on beer? Omar, Rav Huna responded, well, hashtu ma pirzoma uteine ve'asne. Well, when it comes to barley beer or fig beer or different kind, maybe straw, different kind of berry beers, that those are considered more chashuv than just the regular beer that they had at the time, which was date beer. Deba'oi minei me Rav, that I asked the kasha from Rav. V'Rav me Reb Chia. Rav asked his Rebbe Reb Chia. Reb Chia me Rebbe. And Reb Chia asked from Rebbe. So Mamish, Rav Huna is saying that this question that he asked Rav, Mamish went to about as high as you can get, relatively speaking. Rebbe. Rabbeinu HaKadosh. V'lo pashat lei. And Rebbe didn't give him an answer. Shechra mibaya. Are you even going to ask about just regular old date beer? Ki'ilu. Rav Chizda asked Rav Huna about, can you make kiddush on date beer? Rav Huna said, well, I asked Rav about these fancier kind of beers, and Rav asked Reb Chia asked Rebbe, and we didn't get an answer. So certainly, date beer, which is a lower level kind of a beer, you would not use for kiddush. Sover mina. So the other students assumed that what that meant is kiddushe udelo makdishinon ilave aval abdule mabdelinon. So you might think. So they thought to assume. The other students thought to assume. Okay, so we don't make kiddush on date beer, but maybe you can make Havdalah on date beer. Amlu Rav Chizda said to the Machiyom Rav, this is what Rav said, Kishem she'ein mikachin olav, kachin mafdilin olav. Just like you don't make kiddush on date beer, you also don't make Havdalah on date beer. It manami Amar Rav Tachlifa bar Avimi Amar Shmuel. It was also stated that Shmuel says, Kishem she'ein mikachin olav, kachin mafdilin olav. Just like you don't make kiddush on beer, you also don't make Havdalah on beer. Okay, Seder. Fine. Shadule the Rebbe. Levi Shadule the Rebbe. So Levi sent to Rebbe Shichra bar Tlesar Magone. Levi sent to Rebbe a type of beer that was like very, very fancy and very, very tasty. That it was, the way that it was prepared, they would basically, so it was date beer, but they would keep on swapping out the dates so that there would be fresh dates, and they would do this 13 times, and it would be very, very flavorful. Taime have a bosom tuve, and its flavor was very, very, very flavorful. Omar kigon zeroi lekadesh olav v'lomar olav koshiros v'sushbachos ba'olam. Rebbe said, wow, look at this beer. This is mamish very, very geschmacka beer. You could mamish say whatever songs and praises and brachas that you could possibly think of on this amazing beer. B'layla tzairei, and then that night, the beer was giving Rebbe a shtickle shilshul, shtickle diarrhea. So Amr Mason Mufayis, to which Rebbe said, wait a second, this can't make any sense. How could it be that they're causing me so much agony, and yet I'm going to use it to praise the Eibishter and to make brachas on this beer? No way, no how. So we see that this thought to be able to use this very fancy beer didn't really work out so good. Amar Rav Yosef, Adu barabim telu ishti shichra. Okay. Rav Yosef says that he will make a public vow, a public neder, that he will not drink beer. Okay. Amar Rava, says Rava, Ishti mar mezorion v'lo ishti shichra. Wah. Rava says, I'd rather drink water that flax was soaked in rather than drink beer. Okay. Amar Rava, tavishak yusei shichra man de mekadesh shichra. Okay. Rava says, may your drink be beer, he who makes kiddush on beer. Kielu, drinking beer, I guess, was if you couldn't afford, if beer was not, beer, I guess, was not very expensive or not very fancy or whatever, and if you couldn't afford anything else, so you bought beer. So Rav is basically saying, somebody makes kiddush on beer, well then watch out, because you're basically only going to be able to afford beer. Things are going to go south. Rav Ashkechel Rav Huna, no, Rav Ashkechel Rav Huna found Rav Taka de Kodesh Ashichra. So interestingly, Rav Huna found Rav that Rav was Taka making kiddush on beer, which is very interesting, because Rav just said that just like you don't make kiddush on beer, you also don't make havdalah on beer. And now we see that Rav Huna found Rav Taka making kiddush on beer. Okay. Omar lei. So Rav Huna says to Rav, Shari Abba lemikne istira mishichra. To which Rav Huna says to Rav, he says, wow, it must be that you've started to make a living from selling beer. That I guess apparently Rav started selling beer, and Rav Huna was pointing out, okay, from the fact that you are making kiddush on beer, clearly you like it, and that must be because you are selling it and making a living from it. Okay. Toner Abanon, the rabbis taught, Emekachin el ala yain. We only make kiddush on wine. And we only make a beracha on wine. The Gemara says, what do you mean you only make a beracha on wine? What do you mean? Don't we say the beracha of shakon yevdvaro on beer and on water? What do you mean you only make a beracha on wine? Abai says, this is what it means. No, what it means is that we don't say, get me a kosher bracha, I want to make a kosher, I need a cup to bench on, so we're going to give you wine. We're not going to give you beer or water or whatever. So the rabbis taught we don't make kiddush on beer. The name of Rabbi Elazar Reb Shimon, they say, yeah, you can taka make kiddush on beer. Okay. V'ti'imas, what's the word? V'ti'imas yayin kolshu. And then in terms of how much of the wine do you actually have to drink? So you only need to drink any amount. You say whatever it is. Let's say Abdallah. So you say Abdallah. How much of it do you have to drink? Just a taste, whatever it is. Rabbi Yossi Bar Yehuda Omer lo lugma. So Rabbi Yossi Bar Yehuda says, no, you taka have to drink a cheekful. Amar Ravuna, Amar Rav, Mechintani Rav Gidol Diminarish, Hamakadesh V'Toam lo lugma yotza. That if a person makes kiddush and he drinks a cheekful, then he's yotze. V'imlav lo yotze, if he doesn't drink a cheekful, so then he's not yotze. Amar Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak, says Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak, Ana Tanina lo Gidol Bar Menashe v'lo Gidol Bar Menyome el Gidol Stama. Says Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak, he says, look, I didn't learn that it was any particular Gidol, right? We just said it was Gidol Diminarish. Says Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak, I just learned that it was just regular Rav Gidol. L'may nafkamina, who cares? What's the difference? L'mir madide adide. The nafkamina is if we're trying to figure out who said what. So it matters if it's this Rav Gidol or that Rav Gidol. So that's why it matters. So what do you guys say? I feel like it's not super clear, right? What do you guys say about Hamar Medina? I don't know. I feel like from the Gemara it's not super clear. Like, first of all, in the Gemara it tends to be in a case like where you don't have wine, so then maybe you can use one of these other substitutes like beer. It doesn't necessarily sound like lichatchila you could just swap out whatever you want, at least from the Gemara and the way the Rashbam is explaining it. Also, we got like kind of mixed messages, because on the one end we saw Rav saying that you don't make Kiddush on beer, you don't make Havdalah on beer, but then we see Rav himself did make Kiddush on beer. Also, we assume that maybe even if you can make Havdalah on beer, you wouldn't make Kiddush on beer, but then when Rav Hidafka made Kiddush on beer, which is like the one that is even more of a Kiddush, I don't know. And then we saw this brisa in which we have a Tanakama says that you don't make Kiddush on beer. We have a Belosa Reb Shimon who says that you can. It doesn't seem to be super clear, right? What do you want me to tell you? Samuch lemincha. So finally, we're getting back to our Mishnah from a long time ago. What, a week ago already? So it says that from already samuch lemincha, from close to mincha on Erev Pesach, you don't eat. So now there's, of course, as we know, there's two options for mincha. We already know this from a million years ago, from brachas. There's two options for mincha. There's mincha gedola, mincha ketana. Mincha gedola is 6.5 hours into the day, 12:30 on our perfect day. And mincha ketana is from 9.5 hours into the day, 3:30 on our perfect day in the afternoon. Now, samuch lemincha would be a half an hour before that, so 6 hours into the day and 9 hours into the day, respectively. So, they want to know samuch lemincha gedola tanan or dilma samuch lemincha ketana tanan. So, when we say that already a little bit before mincha we don't eat on Erev Pesach, is that mincha gedola at 6.5 hours, or kilu stop eating at 6 hours, or mincha ketana kilu before mincha ketana, i.e. stop eating at 9 hours. So, samuch mincha ketana, no, what? Samuch mincha gedola tanan, umishum Pesach dom asi lemimshach. No. Vasim nunu imlebed pischa. So if we say that already you stop eating on Erev Pesach from 6 hours into the day, how come? What would be the rationale? The rationale is, well, you can only start offering, right? We said that an Erev, in general, right? This is going back to Daf Nun Ches, right? The first Mishnah of Perek Tamid Nishchat, when we, they kicked off all the Kodshim Sugyos, that we said that in general, in the Beis HaMikdash, the Korban Tamid Shel Ben Arbaim is slaughtered at 8.5 hours into the day, and offered at 9.5 hours into the day. However, on Erev Pesach, we slaughter the Korban the Korban Tamid at 7.5 hours into the day, and then offer it at 8.5 hours into the day, and then right after that, we start doing the Korban Pesach at 8.5 hours into the day. Now, if already we're saying don't eat starting 6 hours into the day, what would be the rationale? The rationale would be, well, because if you start eating at 6 hours into the day and make a big meal, well, then you might keep on going weiter, and you'll bichlal forget, you'll neglect to do the Korban Pesach. So that would be the rationale for saying that, already don't eat from 6 hours into the day. Fine. O Dilma, or perhaps, samuch mincha ketana tanan. Or maybe we're saying from 9 hours into the day, do not eat. Umishum matzah. Maybe what we're saying is stop eating on Erev Pesach from 9 hours into the day. Now, you could have already done your Korban Pesach by then, because at 8.5 hours into the day we start doing Korban Pesach. So it could be you already did your Korban Pesach, so we're not concerned that you're going to miss out on doing the Korban Pesach. However, if you're eating at 9 hours into the day, so guess what? Comes time to eat matzah at night, you're already full. And it's going to be achila gasa. Going to be like too much eating. We don't want that. So that's the kasha. Okay? We're talking about 6 hours in a day, because we're concerned you might miss out on the Korban Pesach, or 9 hours into the day, we're concerned that you might eat the matzah. Achila gasa, Amar Ravina Toshma. Says Ravina, come in here. Afilu Agrippas HaMelech, Shu Rogel Lecho B'Teisha Shos, Osuhayim Lo Yochel Ad Shetechshach. You hear that? Says Ravina, that listen up. Afilu Agrippas HaMelech, even King Agrippas, okay, who would normally eat at 9 hours into the day. That's what he would do. He wouldn't eat until 9 hours into the day. That was his thing. That day, he wouldn't eat bichlal until the nighttime. He wouldn't eat at all until the Seder. Now, so I understand if we're saying that it's samuch lemincha ketana, that stop eating from 9 hours into the day. That's the chiddush of Agrippas, and let's go weiter for a few minutes. If we're saying that it's for mincha gedola, right? So we have Agrippas, King Agrippas. He would generally eat at 9 hours into the day. We're saying that on Erev Pesach, however, he wouldn't eat his 9 hour into the day meal. He would wait until the nighttime. Now, the Gemara wants to say for now, I understand this if we're saying Mincha Gedola. No, Mincha Ketana. Because if we would say you don't already eat from 6 hours into the day, so obviously King Agrippas is not going to be eating at 9 hours into the day. He already couldn't eat for 3 hours before, then obviously he wasn't eating at 9 hours into the day. Right, so again, if we say that you stop eating already from 6 hours, well then Agrippas. What's the big chiddush of Agrippas? Obviously he's not eating at 9 hours into the day. He can't already eat from 6 hours into the day. What's the Agos Abach? Elamai, Samach Mincha Ketana Tanan. So rather it must be that Samach Mincha Ketana. But listen up, what does the Gemara ask? The Gemara says, but Sof, my Rebuse de Agrippas. Maybe you were thinking this question. But still, at the end of the day, what's the big chiddush that Agrippas didn't eat on Erev Pesach? Hamatile Zmani Surah. 9 hours, you're not supposed to be eating at 9 hours anyways. So Agrippas would normally eat at 9 hours. Erev Pesach, we're saying don't eat from 9 hours. So just like it's no chiddush that he wouldn't eat if we would stop eating at Mincha Gedola because you're already not allowed to eat. Well, guess what? 9 hours also you're not allowed to eat. So listen to this. I may have thought that actually, well, since Agrippas HaMelech, he doesn't eat Bechlal until 9 hours, so maybe his 9 hours in the day is basically like our 4 hours a day, as we learned on Daf, who can tell me what Daf it was? Daf Tesvav? No. Daf Yudalet, Daf Tezayin. Oh man, I found it the other day. But somewhere at the beginning of the Masechta. Now I'm forgetting what Daf it was exactly. But, let's see, maybe it was a Daf Tes. Let's see. Is this it? Yeah, here it is. Daf Yud Beis and Beis. So we learn on Taka Daf Yud Beis and Beis that the 4 hours into the day is Ma'achol Kol Adam. That's when we eat, 4 hours into the day. Okay? So we might think that, so for us, if we eat at 4 hours into the day and we eat at 9 hours into the day, we're mamish not going to be hungry for matzah. But maybe I would have had the thought to say that Agrippas, since he doesn't eat b'chlal until 9 hours into the day, even though if he eats at 9 hours into the day, he still might not be hungry at the Seder, and it might be okay for him to eat at 9 hours into the day and also to eat at the Seder, because we said that the only reason why you wouldn't be able to eat at 9 hours into the day is because maybe the matzah will be achilas gasa. Maybe you already offered your korban pesach. The only reason not to eat is so that you'll eat matzah l'tayavon. Maybe Agrippa, since he's only eating at 9 hours into the day anyways, he'll still be able to eat matzah l'tayavon. It's not like us that we eat at 4 hours into the day, and if we eat also at 9 hours into the day, then we'll be full. Maybe he wouldn't be full, kamash malon, that even Agrippas wouldn't eat. So we see that from the fact that Agrippas didn't eat on Erev Pesach, and it was a chiddush. Why was it a chiddush? The chiddush is because you already don't eat from Mincha Ketana, and I may have thought to say, well, if the reason for not eating from Mincha Ketana is because maybe you'll be full already for matzah, maybe I may have thought to say that Agrippas wouldn't be full when it comes to matzah because he's only eating that, only at 9 hours. So kamashmal that even Agrippas wouldn't eat on Erev Pesach, so that we'll be sure that he has matzah l'te'avon. Omer Reb, so it says Reb Yossi, but there's a gears that changed it to Rav Asi. Avamat bilhu b'mini targemo. So even though we don't eat on Erev Pesach, you're allowed to dip different inyanim, like vegetables, maybe meat. You can dip them into things. As Rashbam says, "Shekol ma'achol ma'idei tibol." That was the way that they ate things. They would always just dip different things in different things. Rabbi Yitzchak matbul b'yarkei. Rabbi Yitzchak would eat vegetables. Tanin Am Yochim, we also learn in a brayso like this, a shamish, if you have somebody who's preparing the meal, the waiter, the server, matbul b'vnei me'ayin, he could dip things in the animal intestines, sounds delicious, v'nosnan l'fnei orchim, and give them to the guests who have come. And even though we don't have a proof for this, zeicher l'davar, we have sort of something that is similar. Shenemar niru lachem nir bal tizru lekotzim, plow for yourselves, you're plowing and don't seed onto thorns. What does this mean? It means that just like when you plant things, you don't just throw seeds onto the ground, what you do is you plow it first, and you prepare the ground, and then you put in the seeds. So here also, when it comes to food, if we want to be able to eat matzah l'te'avon, we want to be able to eat matzah with an appetite. So a good mahalach is to first eat a little bit, things that aren't going to fill you up, like vegetables and stuff, like an appetizer, and then that gets you excited for the food that's coming later on, which is why they would eat little things on Erev Pesach, so that comes the Seder night, comes time to eat matzah, you'll mamish have a big appetite. Now that was daf Kuv Zayin of Masechta Pesachim, another great daf here in Arvei Pesachim, and some interesting things like Hamar medina, the equivalents, the wine equivalents in different places, things that can be used for Havdalah. It was unclear if it could be used for Kiddush. What's the minimum share that you have to drink from a kos shel beracha? So we saw two different opinions. One opinion is any amount, a kol shehu, any amount. The other opinion is milo lugmav, a cheekful. And that, the Maisa, I think, is what we do. We dafka drink a cheekful from a kos shel beracha. Then we discussed not eating on Erev Pesach. We had two options. Is that talking about from 6 hours into the day or from 9 hours into the day? And in the end, we proved from Agrippas HaMelech that it's talking about 9 hours into the day. Okay? And the reasons for those two mahalachs would be, you would stop eating from 6 hours into the day to make sure that you don't get so involved in your Suda that you forget to bring Korban Pesach. And the argument to say 9 hours into the day would be that even though you may have already brought your Korban Pesach, but if you eat a big meal now, you might not be hungry for the matzah. And then at the very end, we discussed a little bit about, that when we say not to eat, that doesn't apply to little small things like vegetables or little bits of meat, that will really just will only whet your appetite. Those things would be acceptable. And we're going to continue tomorrow with different examples of things that you can eat on Erev Pesach. Friends, thanks for joining me. Have a great day. Peace out.